actually have a different viewpoint here on Chinese Communist Party that I want to elucidate. But first, let me say on the Chancellor's remarks today, I think they were right on target. But I would also say the complexity of the world today means that we can't just concentrate on the Middle East. That if we put all our resources and all our energy in dealing with the ISIL situation, which we have to deal with, and neglect East Asia, we will deal with the tactical and neglect the strategic. And so I just admonish you that I wish the world were simple enough that we could take on one challenge at a time. But this is a world that is highly complicated, and there are a lot of challenges that we're going to be dealing with all at the same time. I do come from the CIA, and I come from the East Asian Mission Center. That said, let me say that my remarks are my own and not necessarily reflective of U.S. government policy. I would also say that to just explain the changes that are going on at CIA in very brief terms, we've taken a page out of the military's book. The military went a few years ago to the combatant command structure. We like that structure. We think it has built a very, very solid military capability. And what we're trying to do now is move intelligence in the same direction, so that on East Asia, all our resources on East Asia are together in one sort of common grouping, and we use the synergies of all of the different capabilities of the CIA against that particular set of issues. So it's an exciting period, actually, of change for us. But let me go to China. And what I want to do is very quickly do what Leon Aaron did far more masterfully yesterday when he talked about Putin. What I want to talk about is, what does the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, believe in? He has only been there for 3 years, and so he was not a known quantity. In fact, when I went to Beijing with President Bush in 2008 for the Olympics, the president was very excited about the Olympics. I was excited about meeting Xi Jinping because I thought there would be great insight I could take home, and I could, have dinner out on the subject of Xi Jinping for a good long time. He was boring in that meeting. He gave us absolutely nothing of interest. And the reason was he wasn't in power yet. And in the Chinese system, the tall nails always get hammered down. And so he was very, very cagey in his rise to the top. Consequently, we have only since 2012 seen what this man's agenda is. And let me go through a little bit of the agenda. First of all, what the Admiral said was true. A lot of Chinese did not believe in the Chinese Communist Party anymore. Well, he's going to change that. He says, and he has said it very clearly, I want a cleaner party. I want a party that is more disciplined, and I'm the man to do it. And what he has done has been remarkable. He has taken on every sector of the Chinese system in an anti-corruption campaign, the likes of which has never been seen in China before. He has taken on Politburo Standing Committee members. He has taken on the children of the elite. And basically what had happened to the Communist Party over the years of Deng Xiaoping's "to get rich is glorious," the Communist Party got rich, individually got rich. And what you saw was the erosion of what was the basis of China since 1949. How has he done this? I've talked about the anti-corruption campaign. The other is that he has revived the notion that there is a first among equals in the Politburo Standing Committee. In fact, you may argue that he's moving toward first and no equals. The way he has done this is he's created 5 party leading groups, which have taken over from the institutions of government. So there's a leading group on reform, and that he heads. There is a leading group on deepening reform in the military, these transitions he's trying to make. He heads that. There is a leading group on informationalization In other words, how to use new digital media to get the message of the Communist Party across. He is head of that group. He is head of the Finance and Economic Committee. I think you see a pattern here. This man is taking the power back to the top of the Chinese system because he really did believe, and many in the party believed, that China was headed toward color revolution. That as the party weakened and as power became more diffuse in the system, great danger was coming to the Chinese system. If you look at, and I'll just briefly say this, Bo Xilai and the situation that developed with Bo Xilai in southern China, he was almost a warlord by the end of his period of control. And they had to do something about that. They were not going to let China fall apart. He believes he has the mandate of heaven. He believes that he, as the son of one of the founders of China, as a crown prince of China, they often call them in China, that he will bring China back to greatness, and that the 21st century is the century of China. This is a very popular view in China. I was on a small boat with a baker from Guangzhou sitting there, and we were talking, and he looked at me at one point and said, "The last century was yours, this century's mine." That is a very real feeling among the Chinese people, and he is playing to that kind of nationalism. He's also doing a very interesting thing going beyond Mao. In other words, Mao's theories and Leninist doctrine was very effective, but it fell off in Chinese culture and society. It lost its resonance. He is now going back to the concepts of 5,000 years of Chinese history, and he is endorsing Confucius and Mengzi, and he is making himself into sort of the sage emperor, the benevolent leader with a lot of power who divvies out the goods and governs well. Now, the third thing I would say about what he believes is he believes that we want to bring him down, that we want to contain China, and ultimately we want to destroy China. This has been ingrained in the Chinese culture for a great many years, and it continues to be there. We try very hard to explain to the Chinese that if we wanted to bring them down, why would we have traded the way we have with them? Why have we accepted them so well into the world? But somehow it doesn't resonate as well as it should. So when they see things like the TPP, they say, again, you're trying to leave us out of the trade situation in East Asia because China's not part of the TPP. Or when they see us, quote unquote, interfering in the South China Sea. Well, you have no claim to any of these islands. Why would you be doing this? It must be because you still don't want us to be a strong, prosperous power. President of the United States has really said this till he was blue in the face to the Chinese, and other presidents have as well. But it is deeply ingrained in the Chinese view, and it's very hard to get over. Let me do a couple of implications of this. First of all, President Xi Jinping is much bolder and much more assertive than the last two Chinese leaders. In that regard, he, in the South China Sea, has taken a much more aggressive stance than we might have expected out of his predecessors. I think, frankly, he's taken a page out of Putin's book. He has seen there were opportunities because of the distractions, perhaps, of the United States in other areas. Also, he held a meeting with the leader of Taiwan on November 7th. That was a surprise to everybody. I would submit to you, I think it was a surprise to the foreign ministry of China and many of his own people. This is a man who's making decisions within a small inner circle. So what's good about that? Well, there are a couple things that are very good for us. One is if you look at the climate change decisions the Chinese made, what they will take to Paris, this is a very good step. It is a very good direction on carbon emissions. Secondly, we have gotten a very interesting agreement with the Chinese on cyber, a controversial agreement, but it is the first time the Chinese have acknowledged that there is a problem on the cyber side, that Chinese entities have been involved in espionage against the United States in commercial sense. So he is a leader we can work with in that regard. I think the dangers of Xi Jinping are really that his boldness internally and the way he wants to take China is actually at fundamental odds with some of what China needs to do. If you think about the information age, if you're going to take power back up to the center, and you're going to control all the media, how do you get the entrepreneurial spirit going? How do you create the commerce you need to make in China? I also think that we shouldn't think about talking about this man as a 10-year ruler. He has talked about quite openly that the Mao Zedong era lasted 30 years, the Deng Xiaoping era lasted 30 years. What comes next? I think you might be able to figure out where his thinking is going on that. So I think that we are at a very interesting point, and I'll say one more thing on the economic side. The stock market crash in Shanghai this summer was very instructive about Xi Jinping and how he's trying to operate. On the one hand, the Chinese told everybody and their brother in China to get into the stock market. It was a great thing. The government said, look at that market, it's going up like gangbusters. We all need to be part of this. When it crashed, the Chinese government said, whoa, wait a minute, we'd better intervene. And so rather than let market forces operate, which is frankly what they should have done, they intervened heavily. And thus, what we see is a cognitive dissonance between the desire to move China forward. I think he is an economic reformer, but this emphasis he has on party control is at odds with a lot of the rest of the agenda of China. I'll leave it there. Yeah, I think an important point to be made here is why have people started to look at China a little differently? Because China has overreached at too early a stage in sort of its rise. Let me explain that a little bit. The Chinese were very careful for a long time and very cautious in their behavior. The move into the South China Sea and the way they've built up those islands, now 3,000 acres have been created off the seabed. This is something that the Southeast Asians have sat up and take notice of. And they now say, wait a minute, I thought you were joining the rules of the international community. And with this sort of move and the creation of an air defense identification zone in the East China Sea, the Chinese have sort of revived the China threat in a way that it had receded. So, and then I think in the cyber realm, we are not the only people in the world who have seen the Chinese come at them. The Chinese have come at every nation that they can possibly think of in the cyber area. And I think this has been a critical mistake on the Chinese part, because what they've done is rather than accept the international order, they are saying we want to reshape the international order to some of our rules. And so I think it is, frankly, the result of Chinese actions that people are now less sure that China is a status quo power. Okay, on the popularity of Xi, which is a very interesting question. It depends which groups in China you ask. The Chinese elite today is shocked by his behavior. Frankly, if you get them aside, they'll say, he has shaken us to the core. And one of the problems that he's created is that you all know that the Chinese economy has been slowing because of a change, overcapacity, and an attempt to change from investment-led to consumer-led. But there's another problem that he's created in that with the anti-corruption campaign, no official wants to give out any loans to anybody anymore for fear that they will be accused of doing something bad with the money. So while there has been that change, he has also affected economic growth in China. Now, the public is very pleased with what he's done in general. because he has gone after something that has really bothered them. They have been preyed on by officialdom. They have had to pay bribes. Every promotion in the Chinese military, we now understand, took a bribe for many, many years. And the people were tired of this. They were tired of a leading group in the government that was predatory. And so that has been popular. His difficulty, though, is this popularity will wane if the Chinese economy slows too far. Because there is the implied in the economic reforms of Deng Xiaoping, and it has been a tenet ever since the beginning of the reform era, that we will allow the government to make policy. We won't get involved in politics, but the government in turn will create an environment in which our incomes and our livelihood continues to go up. So there's some danger in what he's doing. He calls this the new normal, and he's hoping for a new normal that is around 7% growth a year. There are a lot of economists who are doubting that right now. And so we'll have to see whether this popularity is maintained or whether he starts to hit some problems because of the economic situation. Well, they don't have to retire. This is an informal rule it's an unwritten rule of the Chinese Communist Party in recent years. And there are a lot of people who say, why would she have the head of the corruption, Wang Jishan, leave? This guy has been so effective for him, he needs him to remain, and even though he has passed the age standard. Unless he's done, but that seems unlikely. But I think that one of the things that scares these families is there has been stability in the Chinese system for the last few years because of the consensual nature of the leadership. He's disrupted that. And he's gone after people who were aligned with some of the other networks within the leadership. And so I think some of what you're hearing is the result of a little bit of, are we going back to a strongman leader? And Chairman Mao was a strongman leader and didn't turn out so well. So I do think there is some concern about where he's headed. Okay? You know, hope springs eternal. And with each generation of Chinese leaders, and I'm sure Mr. Inman will agree with me, we always say, well, this is the generation that's going to be something new, something different. And we've been a bit disappointed in this process. So I'm a little leery of hoping that the next Chinese leader is something different. It's possible. It is. You make a very good point that the farther you get from the revolutionary generation, the less resonance some of this has. I mean, in some ways, there are two Chinas today, and I think you know this as well as I do. There's the party China, and then there's an entrepreneurial China. And the two are different as night and day in many ways. So if you could get a leader who comes from that entrepreneurial China, you know, I think we'd be in a better place. The difficulty is that Xi Jinping is going to choose somebody from within his circle, whether, you know, and so I'm not sure we're going to see that very soon. But I am hopeful. There is a lot of change in China. There are a lot of new thinkers in China below the elite level, below or outside of the Chinese Communist Party. So I'm always hopeful that the future will bring something different.